The night was silent when the ship landed. It was not a huge ship like in the movies, not glowing or filled with noise. It was quiet, almost broken, like a wounded bird falling from the sky. People from the small town gathered far away, afraid but curious. Soldiers stood closer, their guns ready. No one knew what would step out from the strange silver craft. Then the doors opened and two figures appeared. They were not tall, not monstrous. In fact, they looked like fragile girls. Their skin had a faint silver glow, soft like moonlight. Their hair floated gently as if touched by an invisible wind. Their eyes were not normal. They shone like tiny galaxies carrying stars and shadows inside. The crowd gasped. Some people stepped back. Others whispered in fear. The girls stood close together, holding each other's hands. The older one, Lyra, wrapped her arm around the younger, Serene, as if she wanted to protect her from the entire world. Lyra's chin was raised, her face calm, but her body trembled. Saren pressed her face against her sister's shoulder, too scared to look at the humans staring at them. A soldier shouted, "Stay where you are!" His voice echoed through the night. The girls did not move. They looked tired, broken, almost too weak to stand. Finally, one of the men in black suits, the kind who always looked important, stepped forward. He spoke loudly but not kindly. "You are now under human custody. You will live here. You will follow our rules. Do you understand?" Lyra nodded slowly. Her voice was soft, almost like a whisper carried by the wind. "We understand." Serene only held her sister tighter. She did not speak. She did not need to. Everyone could see the fear in her eyes. The crowd began to murmur louder. Some said monsters, others said children. No one agreed. No one knew what these two strange beings really were. The government did not ask them what they wanted. They simply decided the sisters would live in the town under watch among humans. They were forced into a small house at the edge of the neighborhood. It was not warm, not welcoming. Just walls and a roof like a cage made of bricks. That first night, Saren cried. She sat by the window staring at the stars. Her small hands pressed against the glass, as if she could touch the sky and fly back home. "I want to go home," she whispered again and again, her voice breaking like glass. Lyra sat beside her, pulling her into a hug. She stroked her hair and whispered gently, "I know, little star. I know, but our home is gone. We can't go back." Her voice cracked, but she kept speaking softly, trying to be strong. "We have to stay here now. Maybe we can build something new." But even as she spoke, Lyra's own eyes filled with tears. She was only pretending to be brave for her sister. Inside, her heart was breaking. The next morning, the town came to look at them. Children peeked from behind fences. Adults stood at a distance whispering. Some threw stones near the house just to see if the aliens would react. Serene flinched at every sound. Lyra stood in the doorway, glaring at the crowd even though her knees were shaking. They did not want to fight. They did not want to harm anyone. But already they were treated like a danger. When they walked through the town to attend the school the government forced them into, silence followed them. Children whispered behind their backs. Some laughed cruelly. Teachers stared at them not with kindness but with curiosity, like they were strange animals in a cage. Serene struggled the most. She was younger, softer, more sensitive. Every word of cruelty cut her deeply. When the other children mocked her glowing skin, she covered her arms with long sleeves. When they laughed at her strange accent, she stopped talking in class. Lyra tried to be strong for both of them. She kept her head high even when she wanted to cry. At night, when Seren wept into her pillow, Lyra whispered promises she did not fully believe. "It will get better. They will learn. One day they will see we are not monsters." But inside she wondered if they would ever be seen as anything more than outsiders. The town itself was divided. Some wanted the sisters gone. They said it was dangerous to keep them here. What if they bring war? What if they bring disease? They shouted at meetings. Others felt pity. "They're just children," a few said. They didn't choose this. Still, pity was not love, and kindness was rare. The sisters lived each day with heavy hearts. They walked through streets where doors closed at their approach. They sat in classrooms where desks around them stayed empty. They returned home to silence, the house cold and lonely, filled only with the sound of Seren's quiet sobs. And yet, despite all of this, they held on to each other. Every night, before closing their eyes, Lyra would take Seren's hands and whisper, "As long as we are together, we are not lost." And Seren, even with tears on her face, would nod. Together, she whispered back, the world had pushed them into this strange human town. The people looked at them with fear and hate, but the sisters had survived worse. Their planet was gone, their people scattered. All they had now was each other. That was enough to keep walking forward. But deep inside, neither of them could shake the question that haunted every silent night. Would they ever be accepted as more than aliens? Would they ever truly belong? The answer waited ahead, hidden in the days to come. The sisters tried to adjust to life among humans, but every day felt like walking through a storm of silence and stares. The little house given to them by the government stood at the edge of the town, almost like it had been placed there on purpose, close enough to watch, far enough to separate. Every morning, Lyra woke first. She opened the curtains and looked at the street outside. Sometimes she saw neighbors walking quickly past, heads turned away. Sometimes she saw children pointing at their house, whispering to each other as if the walls themselves were dangerous. It was a strange feeling to be alive yet invisible. Serene hated mornings. She would sit at the edge of the bed hugging her knees, whispering, "I don't want to go." But Lyra would take her hand gently and say, "We must. If we stay hidden, they will never know who we are. We must try." And so together they walked to school. The streets were filled with humans rushing to work, laughing or talking loudly. But whenever the sisters passed by, the air changed. Conversations stopped. Smiles faded. Some people crossed to the other side of the road. Others glared openly as if the sisters had no right to walk among them. Seren lowered her head, her glowing hair falling like a curtain to hide her face. Lyra kept her chin raised even though her heart trembled. She whispered softly to her sister, "Don't let them see your fear. We are more than their hate." At school, the cruelty was sharper. Children are quick to copy what they hear at home. Some giggled when the sisters entered the classroom. Others whispered cruel names, moon ghosts, silver freaks, star trash. Every word felt like a stone thrown at their hearts. One day, Seren dropped her books in the hallway. The pages scattered like wings across the floor. Instead of helping, the other students laughed. A boy kicked one of the books away and Serene froze, tears filling her eyes. She wanted to disappear, but Lyra bent down, gathering the pages calmly, her face expressionless. She whispered, "Don't cry here, little star. Save your tears for home." She stood tall, holding her sister's hand, and walked away without saying another word. Inside, however, she burned with anger. Not anger to fight, but anger at how powerless she felt. Teachers were no kinder. They looked at the sisters not as students, but as puzzles. They asked them questions not about the lessons, but about their bodies, their world, their past. "Can you breathe the same air as us? Do you dream like humans? Do you even feel pain?" The questions cut deeper than insults. To them, the sisters were not children. They were experiments. After school, when they returned to their house, the silence was heavy. Serene often curled up on the couch, whispering, "I don't belong here. They don't want us." Lyra sat beside her, holding her hands tightly, whispering back, "We belong to each other. That is enough for now." But Lyra knew the truth. Seren was fading. Every cruel word, every cold stare, every moment of rejection was breaking her from the inside. And Lyra, though stronger on the outside, carried the same wounds deep within her. Days turned into weeks, and the pattern never changed. The town kept its distance. People kept their suspicion. The sisters walked every day through the same cold walls of humanity, and the weight grew heavier. One afternoon, while walking home, Seren asked in a trembling voice, "Why do they hate us, Lyra? We didn't hurt them. We didn't choose to come here. Why can't they just see us as girls?" Lyra looked at her sister's tear-filled eyes and her heart ached. She wanted to answer, but the truth was too heavy. Instead, she whispered, "Because fear is loud, little star. Fear shouts before love has the chance to speak. But one day, maybe someone will hear us." That night, the sisters sat by the window again. The stars shone above, far and unreachable. Serene pressed her hand to the glass, whispering, "Do you think our mother can see us? Do you think she knows we're still alive?" Lyra closed her eyes, remembering the day their world fell, the fire, the screams, the silence that followed. She took a deep breath and whispered back, "If she could see us, she would be proud. Because we are still standing." Seren leaned against her sister's shoulder and cried quietly. Lyra stroked her hair, whispering again and again, "You are not alone. You are never alone. But even as she spoke, Lyra's own chest tightened. She was strong on the outside, but inside she was breaking. She feared that maybe Seren was right, that maybe they would never be accepted, never be loved, never belong, and yet she refused to let her sister sink into despair. If the world hated them, then she would love Seren twice as much. If no one saw them as children, then she would be her sister's mother, friend, and protector. In the quiet of that lonely night, Lyra made a silent promise. No matter what this world does to us, I will not let you be broken. We will survive. We will keep walking until we find a place where kindness lives. The sisters did not know it yet, but a spark of kindness was waiting for them in the days to come. A small spark, but strong enough to fight the darkness. And that spark would change everything. The days passed slowly, each one feeling heavier than the last. Seren grew quieter, her laughter gone, her voice fading. Lyra carried herself with strength, but even she felt cracks forming in her heart. Every whisper of cruelty at school, every stare from the townspeople made them wonder if they would ever be more than outsiders. But then, something small happened. Something almost ordinary, yet powerful enough to shift the air around them. It was a rainy afternoon at school. The sky outside was gray, and the sound of raindrops tapping the windows filled the classrooms. Students hurried through the hallways trying to avoid getting wet. Seren was struggling with her books again. Her arms were too full, the pile of papers slipping from her hands. She tried to hold them tighter, but one by one the books fell to the floor with a loud thud. The hallway went quiet, eyes turned toward her. A few children laughed softly. No one stepped forward to help. Seren froze, her face red with shame. Tears gathered in her eyes, but she kept her head down, not wanting anyone to see her cry. And then, one boy bent down. His name was Ethan. He wasn't the most popular boy in school. He didn't stand out much, but his heart was different. While others laughed, he knelt beside Seren and began picking up her books. He didn't say anything at first, just gathered the scattered papers carefully, his hands gentle, his face calm. Seren blinked, surprised. She wasn't used to this, someone choosing to help instead of hurt. Slowly, Ethan handed her the books. His voice was quiet but kind. "You don't have to carry this alone," he said. Seren looked at him, unsure if he was making fun of her, but there was no mockery in his eyes, only kindness. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice so soft it was almost lost in the sound of the rain. Lyra, who had been standing nearby, watched carefully. She was always ready to shield Seren, always suspicious of humans, but when she saw Ethan's gentle smile, something inside her softened just a little. The next day, Ethan sat near them during lunch. At first, the sisters were nervous. They weren't used to anyone wanting to be close. Seren avoided eye contact and Lyra remained guarded. But Ethan didn't force them to talk. He just sat there eating his sandwich quietly as if being near them was the most normal thing in the world. On the third day, he spoke. "Do you miss your home?" he asked softly. Lyra hesitated. It was a painful question, but she saw no cruelty in his eyes, only genuine curiosity. She nodded slowly. "Every moment," she said. Seren added in a trembling voice. "We lost everything." Ethan looked down at his hands, unsure what to say. Finally, he whispered, "I can't imagine how hard that must be, but you're not alone here. Not anymore." Those words stayed with them. As the days turned into weeks, Ethan became a constant presence. He would greet them every morning, sit with them during lunch, and sometimes walk with them after school. Other students noticed, and some mocked him for it. "Why are you sitting with the aliens?" they sneered. Ethan ignored them. He didn't care what others thought. Little by little, the sisters began to trust him. One afternoon, when the classroom was empty, Seren showed Ethan something special. She opened her notebook, filled with star maps she had drawn from memory. "This is where we came from," she said softly, pointing to glowing lines and symbols. "These are our skies." Ethan stared at the drawings in awe. "It's beautiful," he said, "like a song written in light." Seren's lips curved into the smallest smile. For the first time in weeks, she felt proud instead of ashamed. Lyra, too, began to open up. She told Ethan little stories about their people, their songs, their traditions, the way the oceans on their world shone like silver glass. Ethan listened carefully, never interrupting, never mocking. His eyes held respect, something the sisters hadn't seen since leaving their planet. At night, when Seren curled up by the window as usual, her whispers had changed. "Do you think Ethan really means it? That we're not alone?" she asked. Lyra hugged her and smiled faintly. "I think maybe he does." Hope, fragile and small, had entered their lives. But kindness is never easy. The more Ethan spent time with them, the more others grew cruel. Some classmates stopped talking to him. A few even pushed him in the hallways, calling him alien lover. But Ethan never stepped away. If anything, he stayed closer to Lyra and Seren, as if protecting them was worth every insult. One afternoon, when Seren was cornered by a group of boys who teased her glowing skin, Ethan stood in front of her. His voice was steady, his fists clenched. "Leave her alone," he said firmly. The boys laughed but backed off. Seren's eyes filled with tears, not of sadness but of gratitude. That night she whispered to Lyra, "He's not like the others. He's different." Lyra nodded slowly. "Yes," she said softly. "He sees us not as monsters, not as experiments, but as people." The sisters didn't know it yet, but Ethan's small acts of kindness were planting seeds. Seeds that would one day grow into something larger than they could imagine. For the first time since arriving on Earth, they felt a spark of belonging. Not with the whole town, not yet, but with one human boy who dared to see them for who they really were. And sometimes that one spark is all it takes to light a fire in the dark. For a while, things felt lighter. Ethan's presence gave Lyra and Serene a reason to smile again. At school, they no longer ate lunch alone. They had someone who stood beside them, someone who did not look at them with fear. But kindness is fragile in a world full of suspicion. And peace for the sisters never lasted long. One evening after school, the sisters walked home with Ethan. The sky was painted red with the setting sun. Seren hummed softly, something she had not done in a long time. Ethan was telling them a funny story about his younger brother when it happened. 3 men stepped out from a corner near the street. Their faces were hard, their eyes filled with hate. They had been watching the sisters for weeks. Whispers had spread in town, that the aliens were dangerous, that they were taking something from the humans just by existing. Fear had turned into anger, and now that anger had a face. "Well, look who it is," one man sneered. "The monsters and their little pet human." Ethan froze, his jaw tightening. Lyra instinctively pulled Seren behind her, shielding her like a shield of flesh and bone. "We don't want trouble," Lyra said firmly. Her voice shook, but she stood tall. The men laughed, stepping closer. "Trouble? You brought trouble the moment you set foot on this planet." Seren clung to her sister, trembling. She whispered, "Lyra, please." One of the men shoved Ethan aside. "Stay out of this, boy. Unless you want to end up like them." Ethan stumbled but stood his ground. "Leave them alone," he said, his voice louder than he thought possible. The man ignored him. He reached forward and shoved Seren. She fell to the ground with a cry, her knees scraping against the pavement. Tears welled in her eyes as she curled into herself. Something inside Lyra snapped. She stepped in front of her sister, spreading her arms wide. Her voice broke as she shouted, "Stop! Leave us alone!" But the men only laughed. "Look at the little alien trying to play human," one mocked. The scene might have turned darker, but then voices filled the street. A group of students, including some who had once mocked the sisters, came running. Ethan had called them earlier, sensing danger. They rushed forward, shouting for the men to back off. Surprised by the sudden crowd, the attackers cursed under their breath and finally retreated. But the damage was done. Seren sat on the ground, sobbing. Lyra knelt beside her, holding her tight. "It's over, little star. You're safe," she whispered, though her own tears slipped down her cheeks. Ethan knelt too, his voice shaking. "I'm so sorry. I should have." Lyra shook her head. "You saved us. You came back. That's what matters." But in Seren's heart, the fear had already taken root. That night, as they sat in their small house, she spoke words that shattered Lyra. "Maybe they're right," Seren whispered, her voice broken. "Maybe we don't belong anywhere. Not here, not anywhere. Maybe we're just..." "Wrong," Lyra froze. Her chest tightened painfully. She grabbed her sister's shoulders and looked into her tear-streaked face. "Don't say that. Don't you ever say that." Her voice cracked, but she kept speaking. "We are not wrong. We are not monsters. We are alive. That is enough. But Seren shook her head, sobbing harder. I'm so tired, Lyra. I'm tired of the stares, the hate, the fear. I just want to be invisible. Lyra hugged her tightly, rocking her gently. I know, little star, I know. But we can't disappear. If we give up, they win, and I will never let them take you from me. Ethan visited that night. He sat quietly with them, listening to Seren's broken sobs and Lyra's quiet whispers. Finally, he said softly, You're not alone in this. I don't care what the others say. You're my friends, and I will stand with you. The sisters looked at him, their eyes swollen with tears. It wasn't enough to erase the pain, but it was enough to remind them that not all humans were cruel. Still, the night felt heavier than any before. The next day, the story spread through the town. Some people were outraged at the attack, calling it shameful. Others muttered that the men had only done what everyone else was thinking. Lines were drawn sharper than ever before. The sisters were no longer just two strange girls. They had become symbols of a choice the town would have to make. But for Lyra and Seren, the world had never felt colder. Every step outside felt like walking through fire. Every face in the crowd felt like a threat. And yet, despite the fear, Lyra held onto her sister's hand tightly. She whispered the same words each night before they fell asleep. As long as we are together, we are not broken. But deep inside, she wondered how much more her sister could take before breaking completely, because the truth was clear now. Kindness existed, but so did hate. And hate was louder, stronger, and far more dangerous. And unless something changed soon, the cold walls of humanity might crush them both. The attack changed everything. It was no longer just whispers in the streets or cruel stares at school. The whole town now carried the weight of the sisters' presence. Everyone had an opinion, and those opinions clashed like fire against ice. Some people were outraged by what had happened. They said the attack was a disgrace, that no child, human or alien, should be treated that way. They are just girls, a few shouted in town meetings. They deserve protection, not violence. But others hardened their voices, louder and angrier. They don't belong here, they argued. They are dangerous. Their kind brought war to the stars. Why should we risk our children's safety for them? The town was split down the middle. Friends became strangers. Neighbors stopped talking. At night, heated arguments echoed through the streets. Humanity was being tested, and no one knew which side would win. For Lyra and Seren, the world shrank smaller each day. They stopped walking through the town as often. The streets felt unfriendly, eyes heavy with judgment. At school, Seren spoke less and less. She barely looked up from her desk, afraid that one wrong glance would spark another storm of cruelty. Lyra remained strong on the outside, but her steps grew slower, her shoulders heavier. At home, silence filled the rooms. The little house that was once only lonely now felt like a prison. Serene often curled up on the couch, staring at the same corner of the wall for hours. Sometimes she whispered, Maybe if we hide long enough, they'll forget us. Lyra's heart ached every time she heard those words. She tried to keep Seren alive with soft stories of their home, with songs their mother once sang, with memories of oceans and silver skies. But even those memories were starting to feel like fragile glass slipping through their fingers. And yet one light remained, Ethan. Every day he came to their door. Sometimes with books, sometimes with flowers, sometimes with nothing but his smile. He refused to let the darkness swallow them completely. Come outside, he would say gently. The sun feels good today. At first, Seren refused. Everyone will stare, she whispered. But Ethan's persistence slowly cracked her shell. One afternoon, she finally stepped outside with him. They sat on the grass near the edge of the field. The breeze brushed against her face, and for the first time in weeks, she closed her eyes and felt something other than fear. Lyra watched from the doorway, her chest tight. She wanted to believe it was possible to feel safe again. At school, Ethan defended them whenever words turned cruel. He did not fight with fists, but with steady courage. When others mocked the sisters, he simply asked, What are you afraid of? They've done nothing to us. His calm voice sometimes silenced more hate than shouting ever could. Still, the cruelty never fully stopped. One afternoon, someone left hateful words scratched onto their house. Go home, monsters, Seren cried when she saw it. She pressed her forehead to Lyra's shoulder and whispered, We will never be accepted. Never. Lyra wrapped her arms around her, whispering back, Then we will endure. Even if the world hates us, we will endure. Her voice shook, but her determination burned like fire. The sisters began withdrawing further. They stopped speaking much in class, stopped walking through the market, stopped smiling at strangers. The world outside was loud with division, but inside their little home everything was quiet. Too quiet. One evening Ethan came again. He sat with them at the table, his hands resting nervously on the wood. Finally he said softly, "I know it feels like the world is against you, but not everyone is. You've changed me, Lyra. You've changed Seren. You've made me see things differently, and I think others are starting to see it too." Lyra frowned, not believing him. "All we bring is trouble. People fight because of us." Ethan shook his head firmly. "No, people fight because they are afraid. But you remind us of something we forget. That humanity is not just about protecting ourselves, it's about choosing kindness even when it's hard." Serene listened quietly, tears in her eyes. His words touched something deep inside her, something she thought had died. That night she whispered to Lyra before sleep, "Do you think he's right? Do you think people can change?" Lyra kissed her forehead gently. "I don't know, little star, but maybe he is the change." Outside, the town continued to argue. Meetings grew heated. Some wanted the sisters gone forever. Others began to question their own fear. Slowly, a few voices rose louder, defending the girls not out of pity, but out of belief. Humanity was being tested, and though hate still shouted the loudest, love had begun to whisper back. For Lyra and Serene, the days were still heavy, but Ethan's kindness kept them from breaking completely. His friendship was like a candle in a dark room. Small, fragile, but enough to remind them that light still existed. And sometimes, a single flame is all it takes to keep the darkness from swallowing everything. The sisters did not know it yet, but the choice the town would make in the days to come would change their lives forever. The tension in the town could no longer be ignored. Whispers had turned to arguments, and arguments to shouting in the streets. It was clear to everyone that something had to be done. So the mayor called for a meeting. Every man, woman, and child was invited. The hall had never been so full. Wooden benches creaked as people packed inside, faces stern, eyes sharp. The air was heavy, almost choking. On one side sat those who demanded the alien girls be removed. On the other sat the ones who defended them. And in the very back, quiet and small, sat Lyra and Seren. Ethan sat beside them, his hand resting gently near theirs, a silent promise that they would not face this storm alone. The mayor stood tall, her voice steady. "We are here to decide what happens next. These girls cannot remain in the shadows of rumor and fear. Tonight we speak plainly." The first voice to rise was harsh. A man stood, his eyes burning with anger. "They are not like us. We all know what aliens have done in the stars. Wars, destruction, death. How can we let such creatures live among our children?" Murmurs of agreement followed his words. A woman answered, her voice trembling but brave. "These are not soldiers. They are children. They did not bring war here. They are orphans, just as human children can be. If we cast them out, we are no better than the monsters we fear." The hall grew louder, people shouting over each other, fear against compassion, anger against reason. The sisters sat frozen, their hands clasped tightly together, their bodies shrinking smaller and smaller. Serene pressed her forehead into Lyra's shoulder, whispering, "Why did we come? They will tear us apart." Lyra squeezed her hand. Her own chest trembled, but she whispered back, "Because silence will kill us faster. We must endure. We must show them who we are." Ethan stood suddenly. His young voice rang louder than many grown men's. "Stop!" The hall quieted, surprised by his courage. He turned slowly, his eyes sweeping across the crowd. "You talk about them like they are weapons. But have you seen them? Have you listened to them? They are just two girls trying to survive. Do you hate them because of what others did far away, or because you are too afraid to see the truth in front of you?" Some muttered, shaking their heads. Others frowned, unsure. But Ethan's words cut through the noise like a blade. The mayor raised her hand. "Enough, the girls themselves have not spoken. Tonight they will." Every eye turned to the back of the hall. Lyra felt Seren trembling beside her, but she stood slowly, pulling her sister with her. Her knees shook, her throat was dry, but she faced the crowd with quiet dignity. "I am Lyra," she began, her voice soft but clear. "This is my sister, Seren. We did not choose to lose our family. We did not choose to land here. We are not warriors. We are not monsters. We are only children who wish to live. The hall was still. Every word carried like a fragile song through the silence. Lyra swallowed hard, her eyes burning with tears she refused to shed. We know we are different. We see it in your eyes every day. Some of you look at us with fear, some with hate. We cannot change what we are, but we can choose who we become. We only ask, please let us become something more than shadows. Serene's hand trembled in hers. For a moment, Lyra thought she would stay silent. But then Serene lifted her face, eyes red, voice breaking. I'm afraid every day. Afraid of what you think of us. Afraid of waking up to find we are unwanted. But I am also afraid of losing hope. If you cast us out, then I will know the universe is empty of kindness, and I don't want to believe that. Her words cracked like glass breaking. For the first time, many saw her not as an alien but as a child, fragile and desperate. The hall shifted. Some lowered their eyes in shame. Others clenched their jaws, unwilling to be moved. Finally, an old man stood. His voice was rough with years but steady. When I was a boy, I was sent away during the Great Famine. People said there was not enough food for strangers, but a family took me in. They shared what little they had. That kindness saved my life. These girls, they remind me of that time. We must be better than our fear. More voices rose in support. Some clapped softly, others nodded. Yet the other side did not fall silent. A young father shouted, "And what happens when more come? What happens if they bring war here? Do we risk our children for theirs?" The hall erupted again, voices clashing like thunder. Through it all, Lyra stood tall, though her heart raced. She lifted her chin and said clearly, "If you choose to hate us, then we will endure it. But know this, we will not become what you fear. We will not answer hate with hate. We will carry the kindness we are given, even if it is small, and we will remember it." Her words struck deep. Even those who still mistrusted them could not deny the strength in her tone. Ethan, unable to hold back, added softly but firmly, "If humanity cannot protect two innocent girls, then what is left of our humanity at all?" The room fell into a heavy silence. People looked at one another, faces torn between fear and conscience. The mayor finally spoke, her voice clear. "Tonight we have seen their hearts. The choice is ours. Do we let fear rule us, or do we choose compassion?" No one gave an answer that night. The hall emptied slowly, people whispering, arguing, thinking. But something had changed. For the first time, the sisters had spoken for themselves, and their voices lingered in every ear. As the night sky spread above them, Lyra and Serene walked home beside Ethan. Serene whispered, "Do you think they believed us?" Lyra looked at the stars, her hand holding Serene's tightly. "I don't know," she said softly. "But we are no longer silent. That is enough for now." And deep inside, for the first time in many weeks, she felt a fragile spark of hope flicker alive again. The night after the meeting felt endless. Lyra lay awake, listening to the quiet breaths of Serene beside her. The stars outside the window glimmered, but they gave her no answers. She replayed every voice in the hall, every word spoken, both cruel and kind. What if the town decided to cast them out? What if the little hope Serene had left was crushed completely? When dawn came, neither sister had slept. They rose silently, their faces pale but steady. Today they would learn their fate. The town gathered again, this time in the open square. The air was heavy like the moment before a storm. Children clung to their mothers, men stood with their arms folded, and women whispered behind their hands. The sisters stood at the center with Ethan by their side. The mayor stepped forward, her face grave. "We have listened. We have argued, and now we must decide." She turned to the crowd. "Who here believes the sisters should stay?" For a moment, no one moved. Then an old man raised his hand, the same one who had spoken of the famine. Slowly, others followed. A few at first, hesitant, trembling, but then more, stronger, clearer. Soon half the square had lifted their hands. "Who here believes they must leave?" the mayor asked next. Another half of the crowd raised their hands, faces hard, voices muttering in agreement. The air cracked with tension. The town was split. Lyra felt her heart sink. She held Serene's hand tighter, whispering, "No matter what happens, we are together." Serene nodded, though her eyes shimmered with tears. The mayor's gaze swept across the divided crowd. "We cannot go forward as enemies. We must find the truth of who we are." Before she could speak further, a voice rose above the crowd. It was Ethan. His face was pale, but his voice steady. "You all know me," he said. You watched me grow up in these streets. Tell me, have I become less human because I stood with them? Have I lost my soul because I call them my friends? No, they have not taken anything from me. They have only given. They taught me courage. They taught me kindness. And if we cast them out, then we lose more than 2 children. We lose ourselves. His words struck the crowd like lightning. People shifted uncomfortably, some lowering their eyes. A woman in the front whispered, "He's right." Another man muttered, "Maybe we've been blinded by fear." Then Seren did something no one expected. She stepped forward, her small frame trembling, her voice barely above a whisper, but clear. "If you want us gone, we will go. We do not want to be a burden. We do not want to bring division. But please, before you decide, ask yourself one question. If you were in our place, alone, afraid, different, what would you pray for? Would you pray for mercy or for exile?" Her voice cracked and she looked down, ashamed of her own tears. But in that silence, her words echoed through every heart. Lyra then lifted her chin, her eyes shining with fierce dignity. "You fear we will bring war. But hear this, we carry no war inside us. We carry only loss. We lost our home, our family, everything we knew. All we ask is to be allowed to live, not as monsters, not as enemies, just as children who dream of a tomorrow." The crowd was silent. Even those who had shouted the loudest the night before seemed unable to speak. Then the old man stepped forward again, placing a trembling hand over his heart. "I will not see children abandoned. Not again." One by one, more people came forward. A woman with a baby in her arms whispered, "If it were my child, I would pray for kindness." A farmer said, "Fear makes us small. Compassion makes us strong." Soon voices began to rise, not in anger but in support. Still not all agreed. Some shouted, "This is a mistake!" But their voices were drowned by the growing chorus of others who had chosen compassion. The mayor raised her hand for silence. Her eyes softened as she looked at the sisters. "It is decided. You will stay. Not as outsiders, not as monsters, but as part of us. And if anyone harms you again, they will answer not just to the law, but to the whole town." Seren gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. Lyra's knees almost gave out beneath her. Ethan grinned through his tears and whispered, "See? Humanity still remembers." The crowd began to disperse, some with joy, some with bitterness. But the decision was made. The sisters were no longer shadows in the corner of the world. They had a place. That night, for the first time, the little house felt different. Warmth filled the air. Neighbors knocked on the door with small gifts, bread, fruit, blankets. Not everyone came, but those who did carried hope with them. Seren clutched a small loaf of bread given by an old woman. Her eyes sparkled as she whispered, "Lyra, they chose us." Lyra smiled softly, pressing her forehead to her sister's. "No, little star. They chose humanity." Ethan sat with them, his heart full. He had watched a town torn by fear choose compassion. He had seen 2 alien girls find their voices and change the hearts of many. And he knew deep inside that this moment would live forever. For in the end, it was not strength of arms or wealth or fear that defined humanity. It was the simple choice to protect the weak, to embrace the different, to see the heart instead of the skin. And that choice, made in a small town for 2 fragile sisters, echoed louder than any war in the stars.